Greetings, and day. Well, good morning to all of you, wherever you are. I hope that you are receiving God's blessings today. Thank you for joining us today. It is my pleasure to welcome you to another episode of Ntomoto. I'm your host, Dr. Owa Onyoha Osimiri. Ntomoto is Igbo Nigerian word that means words of wisdom that I share with you to add to your repertoire. Our topic today is reparations. Why is it important to the African people? Now, African people have spent much of our lives trying to heal from the pain inflicted upon us by our colonial masters and slavers. It has been difficult. It's been difficult putting our wounds to rest when those who have committed their crimes against us will not give air to the wound that their ancestors have created, will not admit that they were wrong, that they contributed tremendously to our pain, and that they are beneficiaries of the consequences of our collective trauma. Some going as far as asking why those who did not directly engage in the act of slavery should compensate those descendants of enslaved ancestors who themselves did not actually experience slavery. We have struggled with this deeply. Many of us still don't even understand what happened to us, why it happened. But over and over and over, we find ourselves confusing the want for justice with the need for a witness to the wound that they caused, to admit that our pain is real. Our physical wounds are hard to miss. But sometimes what you don't see, what are not visible, are most painful, what's internal. That is why it's imperative that the lesions of our past are acknowledged, the internal wounds are recognized as legitimate trauma for us to ever heal as a people. After all, our pain is compounded by the very human fact that many may never agree on the scope of trauma in the archives of Black history. Our internal, spiritual, mental, and emotional ordeal, and the nonchalance of people who have caused it, continue to cause us trauma. The denial of its impact, the denial of its impact caused further pain to the soul. If we don't discuss it, if we don't get compensated, then the healing will be prolonged and may not happen for the descendants of the victims of the dark history of man's inhumanity to his fellow man. What we feel will ease the pain of our past, that we feel right now we so deserve, is compensation of some sort. And most activists call it reparations. I am not an expert in reparations. However, it is indeed my honor and my pleasure to have someone today who's going to discuss this further. His name is Nana Kwesi Jumoke Ifetayo. And if I misrepresented your name or mispronounced it, I do beg your pardon. It is not intentional. Nana Kwesi Jumoke Ifetayo currently serves as the Southeast Region representative of NCOBRA. He is the male co-chair of the South Florida chapter of NCOBRA and the facilitator of the Ashe Committee of NCOBRA. NCOBRA means National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America, the premier national reparations organization in the USA. And he has served as the recent past national male co-chair of NCOBRA, national secretary and male co-chair of the NCOBRA Atlanta chapter. Baba Jumoke is a community organizer, reparations thought leader, lecturer, visionary, father, spirit dancer, event planner, consultant, and entrepreneur. Baba Jumoke has worked with various organizations, including but not limited to ACORN, Trans-Africa, Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC, Federation of Southern Cooperatives, Mississippi Action for Community Education, Nation of Islam, and the Fellowship of Reconciliation. Baba Jumoke serves on the Reparations Committee of the Movement for Black Lives. With over 25 years experience with NCOBRA and a lifetime experience as a community organizer, Baba Jumoke has spoken at numerous schools, universities, conferences, and churches. Baba Jumoke has written articles and done many interviews on the reparations movement. In addition to hosting an annual 6-hour radio program on reparations, Baba Jumoke also hosted a bi-weekly radio show and podcast for 2 years on the Black Talk Radio Network called Conversation Reparations. Brother Jumoke received his BA from the University of the South in Sewanee, Tennessee, with a double major in economics and third world studies. Welcome. It is indeed my pleasure at this moment to bring forth our brother Jumoke. Let me add, brother Jumoke Ifetayo. Hello, hello, hello. How are you? I hope I did you justice with all that. I mean, you've done so much. I hope I compiled it properly. How are you today? Good to have you on the show.
I'm doing wonderful, and thank you. That was a great introduction and laying out the foundation for understanding reparations.
Yes,
And
yes.
thank you very much. Very good.
You are so welcome. So welcome again. It is indeed an honor to have you. And so here are some of the questions that I think are so important that you answer, because many people really do not know what reparations are. So can you define reparations for our understanding today?
Sure, it's a great point. It's a great place to start. So yes, so in COBRA, we've defined reparations as the healing, restoring, and repairing a group of people based on that have been violated, based on their group identity by governments, corporations, institutions, and families. The process. And the reason that we say process is because we understand, as also as you were laying out, that it's not going to be a one-time thing. That healing, the pain and suffering that has happened to us has happened over hundreds of years. So we also think about the fact that the process of healing may take some time as well. And also sometimes people limit reparations to just governments. So we don't limit it just to governments. We feel that there are other, what we call criminal players in the game, which would include corporations, institutions, for example, like many colleges, hospitals, and other institutions that benefited from our trauma and enslavement, and even post-enslavement period as well as even individual families that benefited from the enslavement period as well.
Mm. So now, from your resume, it's showing that you have worked extensively for reparation. What are some accomplishments of the national reparations movement that you can share today?
Yeah, I apologize. I want to, before I do that, go back and elaborate a little bit more on the definition of reparations, if I may.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah. So, in terms of reparations, when I joined in COBRA in the reparation movement, the elders shared with me that there was basically three roads of reparations for people of African descent. Those who wanted to repatriate and go back to Africa because they felt like that's the only way they could, be fully healed, and go back, not just to go back to Africa, but to go back to Africa with resources so we could build schools and hospitals and things that we need, manufacturing and things that we need to be successful over there. Another option within the reparation movement are those who felt like we should have our own sovereign nation state carved out of the United States. And that's a whole radical idea and, a conversation we could even have at a later date. And then there's those people who felt like assimilation would be, the one to stay in the United States and work out their reparations. But one of the things that I feel like is most important for people to understand about defining reparations is the United Nations definition of reparations. So the United Nations definition of reparation breaks reparations down into 5 areas. So the first one is cessation and non-repetition. So cessation and non-repetition talks about the fact that, often, when as we talk about reparations, the crimes and harms are still happening to us, right? We could draw a straight line from enslavement to lynching to police brutality. We could draw a straight line through other areas as well, through health, through housing, and other things as well. And so part of reparations has to be coming up with ways that will not continue in the future and that those crimes and harms will not perpetuate themselves. Another form of reparations is restitution. So restitution looks at the legal standing of a people, it looks at the loss of language and culture and all of those things as well. And so again, separation, having our own sovereign nation, going back to Africa also, feeds into that one as well, restitution. And then in addition to restitution, there is rehabilitation. So rehabilitation looks at the psychosocial trauma that has happened to those people that happened to us in this particular case. And so how, all the things that's needed to for our healing. And you kind of, again, alluded to some of that in your introduction. There's something called transgenerational epigenetics. And transgenerational epigenetics is a science now that is showing how trauma can actually get encoded into your genes, and so into your DNA. And so meaning that, like, if my great-great-grandfather, say, witness a lynching or what have you, and it alters him, but it gets passed down to his son down to me. And so we have some real deep healing that we have to do, mentally, emotionally, physiologically, as people of African descent. Then you have compensation, which a lot of people, know that reparations is associated with compensation, because, we know we live in a society where, a capitalist society, we live in a society where you need money to do things. You need money to get counseling, to get healing, to build institutions for different things. So compensation is definitely a part of reparations. And the last one is satisfaction. So satisfaction looks at how, I say, we restore the dignity of a people. So satisfaction looks at things like apologies, looks at memorials, and looks at education and curriculum development. We need to tell the story of what has happened to us, as you mentioned, again in your introduction, to what happened to us for African people, to ourselves, but also to the United States, as well as to the world. And so that helps to give people a different level of respect and dignity in the world when the proper story is told. So satisfaction is also part of the reparations. And then the last part is what we call self-repair. And so some people use the word internal reparations. I don't particularly like to resonate with that term. I prefer the term self-repair, which was introduced by a professor from Nigeria. And the idea is that, the work that we have to do is really we have to do on ourselves. So even though we can create government policy, even though we can have compensation or different things, the work that we have to do for that healing is work that we have to do on ourselves. And that's the most important aspect of reparations for some people. So that's the full definition that I like to lay out when that I like to unpack when I talk about reparations. And
that is wonderful, because quite frankly, most people think in terms of just money. Right. Not always that you've learned. Now, has that always been the definition that or was that just based on you've expanded it based on the definition by the United Nations?
Right. That definition, I believe, came about around the 1990s. Different countries and different groups were making claims for reparations, and so the United Nations felt like there should be a standard definition or a standard understanding of what reparations would look like. And so they convened a group of experts, and that's what they came up with, those 5 forms of reparations. So we've been incorporating that into our reparations movement and trying, working diligently to educate people on that broader definition of reparations.
Okay, so then you would say that the definition that has now been expanded by the United Nations is part of the accomplishments of this movement. Okay, that's on a national basis, and so that everybody's incorporating this understanding, everybody's incorporating it now, right?
Well, I would say everybody, but we're working on it. That's the goal.
That's your goal. That's your goal for everyone. Yeah, that's really very good, because when I talk to people, as a matter of fact, I did a few little interviews to understand, to see who understood. Perhaps I should have really recorded it and shared it, and it's just interesting. Nothing like what you have talked about. It's always, Black people want to be paid. Black people want money. I said, oh my God, that's not really. I mean, I knew it was more than that. But anyway, thank you for that expansion of the meaning of reparations. Now, I'm sure locally there are programs executed in support of reparations. Okay, what would you tell us the local reparations are? What are some of the examples, and where locally can people, go and learn more if they need to?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure where, how far wide the reach of this show is, but right now I know we're talking in the Atlanta area. And there's been an interesting movement in the reparations movement that started a few years ago now. We've been localizing what we call localizing the reparations movement. So different cities and different states are taking on reparations And so locally here, I'm saying locally here because, again, speaking of the Atlanta area, there's there's been created already what's called a Fulton County Reparations Task Force. So Fulton County includes most of Atlanta, as well as some other cities around Atlanta that people may be familiar with, that they're familiar in the Atlanta area, like East Point, College Park. I believe all of those and other cities are within the Fulton County range. And so that group has been meeting now. They started out meeting once a month. They're now meeting twice a month. And they're focusing on doing the research to see what are the harms that Fulton County has actually done. When Fulton County was incorporated, the enslavement period was still in existence. I think Fulton County was created in the 1830s. So we were still in the enslavement period, but not just the enslavement period, but coming out of the enslavement period, where we know we had stuff like convict leasing and sharecropping and Jim Crow and other things, as well as coming into the current time as well, when we still have health disparities and education disparities, issues around voting rights. I know some of the things that they plan on looking at. Now, also in Atlanta, go ahead.
Is there, and I hope I'm not jumping the gun, but I want people to have this information. I want you to run through. Is there a number that they can call, people can call to find out where the local programs are?
Yeah, if they just, well, yeah, I don't know about, there's not one specific place, but people can look up the Fulton County Reparations Task Force. Just do a search for the Fulton County Reparations Task Force, and it'll come right up, and it'll show the past meeting agendas, the past meeting minutes, and things like that, as well as it'll give you the Zoom link for the upcoming meeting. And also in Atlanta, City Councilman Michael Julian Bond, along with the Social Action Committee of the Delta Sigma Theta sorority, they have been convening some meetings here in Atlanta to bring about, to create, similar to the Fulton County Reparations Task Force, a reparations task force for the city of Atlanta. And then another activist attorney that that works within COBRA, has worked within COBRA over the many years, Brother Mowley Davis. It has an organization called Beacon Hill, and they've been working with Sister Lisa Meyer to put forward legislation in Decatur for reparations as well. So there are things that are happening right now in the local area. And I did want to go back a little bit. I know our conversations are dynamic, and I'll say certain things and it'll trigger you to ask other questions. And I want to get back to your earlier question, though. But in terms of the reparations movement, in terms of accomplishments, we've been really happy with some of the progress that we've made at the national level for reparations. These local reparations initiatives also are making progress, and we could come back and talk about the city of Evanston. We should probably mention the state of California, as well as some other cities, New York, Detroit. There's a whole long list of, maybe some people say almost 100 cities now that are focusing on local reparations, probably over a dozen states that are looking at local reparations, including Georgia. There's a state legislator, Roger Bruce, who has introduced legislation here for the state of Georgia for a reparations commission. And I'm just now trying to find out more information on that myself. But on the national level, and COBRA is primarily focused on the national level, which has been focusing on a bill known as HR 40. And HR 40 was a bill modeled after how the Japanese got reparations. A lot of people say, well, Japanese got reparations, and Native Americans and people, and the Jewish people got reparations. So what did they do? How did they go about it? Well, the Japanese went about it by setting up a study commission bill that made recommendations to Congress for reparations on their behalf. And they did receive their reparations around in 1988. And so John Conyers, congressman, decided to say, let's use that as the model for how people of African descent in the United States get reparations. So he created a reparations study bill that's now known as HR 40. And over time, though, we realized that, and they introduced that bill in 1989 and introduced it every year in Congress, and never got out of committee. But so in 2017, though, many in COBRA and other activists got together and realized that we really needed to update HR 40 and not just call for a study, but actually call for reparations proposals. And so a group of people came together and updated HR 40 and made those recommendations to John Conyers, and he accepted those recommendations. So on January 3rd, 2017, updated bill was entered into Congress. And that bill, one of the updates was including the definition I just gave, the United Nations definition of the 5 forms of reparations. Another update was to ask for reparations proposals. And then another update was to the way the committees were set up, the Congress and the leaders of the Congress and the Senate and the president were to pick the people that would be on this reparations commission. And we felt like the community should have more input as well. So we added 6 more positions to the committee that would come from civil society organizations like NAACP, like NCOBRA, and other community national organizations that's been fighting for social justice and reparations. So we added that they would have, so we would be able to pick some of those appointments as well.
Let me ask you about, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I was going to ask you about NCOBRA. NCOBRA, was that the original purpose to promote reparations, or did they have a mission initially and then down the road they started to incorporate reparations?
No, NCOBRA was set up solely to focus on reparations. And like I said, NCOBRA, we didn't talk about the history of NCOBRA. So NCOBRA came about right around the same time that the Japanese were getting their reparations. And so they started having meetings 1987, 1988. As I mentioned, the Japanese got their reparations around that time. And so there were some leaders and activists in the Black community, in the Black nationalist community particularly, that was saying, look, we believe in reparations and we have other organizations that believe in reparations, but there's no group that's solely focusing on reparations as a national organization. So let's come together and bring our resources together and focus solely on reparations. So that's what they did. And so it was incorporated in 1988. And so right after we incorporated, John Conyers, like I said, started working on the bill, and he actually brought it to NCOBRA for us to endorse it. And so you had what's called the inside-outside strategy in politics. So we had Conyers pushing HR 40 on the inside, and then NCOBRA took up the mission to be the grassroots organization to push HR 40 and reparations to the community and to get community support. So yeah, to answer your question, NCOBRA came about solely for the express purpose of focus on reparations.
That is wonderful to know. I have another question before I go to my next one. I'm full of questions, actually. When we talk about, there are some individuals, I'm from Nigeria, obviously, and there are some individuals who say, well, that reparations is strictly for those descendants of enslaved people in America. And so if your ancestors were not part of that group, if you were not born here, or your ancestors were not born here, or suffered the consequences of enslavement, then you're not entitled to reparations. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, it's quite honestly, that's some of the arguments you've got out there.
That has actually emerged, unfortunately, as a major debate within the reparations movement. And NCOBRA, like I said, was really started with Pan-Africanists and Black nationalists, and so we didn't look at it like that. We didn't look at separating people of African descent and saying, oh, you're a descendant from Nigeria, or you're a descent from Jamaica, or you're not able to trace your lineage all the way back to slavery in the United States. We didn't take that position. There are organizations now that have taken that position. So we look at it from the perspective of people of African descent, like you said, really worldwide have been harmed. And so we say that as a result of those harms, like you said, again, in your beautiful introduction, that as a result of those harms that people need to be repaired. Now, what we have done, though, to attempt to address some of their concerns is that we have introduced the idea of reparations based on different harms or based on different what some people, we use sometimes the word tiered reparations. So meaning that, say, my family, I may be able to trace my lineage all the way back to enslaved Africans in the United States. And so but you don't have that history, but there's still, so there may be programs that I may be able to benefit from that you may not be able to benefit from, but there'll still be other programs that you would be able to benefit from, because as an African, the police don't distinguish you as Nigerian. They see you as a Black woman. They don't distinguish you when you try to get a bank loan per se necessarily as, you're still that may have same challenges as an African American would have in terms of getting loans or whatever. And so we say, what are those harms that have happened to Black people from enslavement all the way to today, and how have those harms impacted people of African descent, whether they're recent, whether they come from Nigeria, Jamaica, or been in the United States for hundreds of years. So that's our position on it. And so but you're right, that has become a debate. And one of the things, I've just been having a recent conversation with a elder, and one of the things I think though is that it would be really great for African nations to really champion reparations even more, because African nations, you all have a claim as well of the loss of people, right, that was stolen from those countries. And so that's a reparations demand, and you all could also demand what happened to your people, which is us.
Yes.
That you
yes,
should
absolutely.
stand up and demand that the United States, as well as those European colonial powers, specifically Britain, France, Spain, Portugal, that invaded your territories, our territories, right? Pay reparations, and there would be a good conversation. Yes, ma'am.
You know what? I'm going to play a video, and then you and I are going to have a conversation about that video. It talks. It's about 7 minutes. So, but I want you to see how you tie reparation to what this woman, God rest her soul, she just passed away, but she's an activist in Nigeria, in Africa. And this is her thoughts about what has happened to us as a people, so that it really connects to reparations. So I'm going to play it for a moment, and we'll come back on the back end and talk about it.
Since we met you people 500 years ago, look at us. We've given everything. You are still taking. It's true. I mean, where will the whole Western world be without Africa? Our cocoa, our timber, our gold, our diamonds, our platinum, our whatever. Everything you are is us. I am not saying it, it's a fact. And in return for all of this, what have we got? Nothing. Anti-personnel indoctrination against ourselves. If you go and cook your horrible diseases like AIDS, you say it is us. You brought us tuberculosis. We didn't have this big cough until white people came here. In exchange for Africa giving Europe 500 solid years of our people, I mean, not Europe, the Western world, of our human beings to work your canes, to dig your gold, to take in gold itself, diamond, I mean, fish, peanuts, palm oil, everything. In exchange for that, we have got nothing. Nothing. And you know it. Nothing. And you look upon, white folks look upon us like monkeys. It is true. It's in your literature. Hey, some of your best thinkers have said this about us. Have you heard of all these Germans? Have you heard?
Okay.
Yes. They said, Lord Burton, people like that, they said, we don't even have the brain of animals. That's what we've got from you people.
But don't you think that this is over now?
Over where? Is it over? Who said that AIDS came from the green monkey? Is it over? Is it over?
Well, if this is your impression, do you think that you can ever forgive us?
It's not a question of forgiveness. I have nothing against you. My point is that you did and you are doing for your survival what is necessary. We can't blame you for that. The fact that we didn't do enough for our own survival and we are still not doing enough for our survival, that is not your problem. Even everybody that God has created has a sense of survival. You know, and if we don't develop it, we can't blame white people. You came here because you needed these things. You took gunpowder from the Chinese. You needed them to shoot people. I think that for me and members of my family, Elmina Castle has got a very, very special significance because they tortured my father's father, my real grandfather, to death there by the colonial government. So for me, I mean, when people like me talk about colonization, neo-colonization, it's not just because one is being intellectually smart. You know, I mean, we have personal touches with it. I mean, I cannot forget that this happened to my grandfather.
Do you consider aid as a new form of colonization?
Of course.
Why?
That's why, you know, my people, the Akans, we have a proverb. It says that good morning, thank you, is never enough to salt anybody's food forever. You cannot build your life on thank you, thank you, thank you, morning, thank you, English, thank you, God. You know, which is what aid makes. You know, we are always receiving. Nobody, look, and I don't care who hears, nobody anywhere in this world is going to send you their best of anything. Do you see? Neither the experts nor what I mean, people, you give us what you can afford. Aid is the leftover, really, and it cannot be enough. What I mean, aid, you can, when, you know, the world is, now the world is one place. So, there is nothing wrong if my house is in a crisis and you offered me something. There's nothing wrong, you know, because there is interrelationship. But a whole nation, a whole continent cannot live forever on aid. And I think aid is we are in Africa, we are in danger of making foreign aid a kind of policy that is wrong. I mean, I think that it humiliates our people. The people in the villages have not asked anybody to go around begging on their behalf.
7 polemiske bøger er det blevet til. Det er skuespil, noveller, en roman, digte og fortællinger for børn. Alt skrevet på engelsk.
To stop there, what are your thoughts about her position about what has happened to us or still happening?
Yeah, very well said. Very, very well said. You know, when I think about you know, the you know, I mentioned that Africans have a strong case for reparations, and I was talking about the loss of people, but also which she talked about, you know, all of the mineral wealth, the cocoa, gold, diamonds, sugar cane, all of that, you know, banana, all of that was basically robbed and still robbed from Africa. All of that, you know, I think goes into the debt that the Europeans owed. And I'm not sure, I really wanted maybe her to unpack a little bit about the foreign aid, which I look at it from the perspective I was thinking was that, you know, that the foreign aid is, you know, still comes in Western terms, and it sometimes creates somewhat of a dependence, you know, what as opposed to finding out what is it that people of African descent in Africa feel like they need and want, as opposed to, you know, surplus food or, you know, whatever that sometimes the European countries will offer. And so I think that, you know, the one of the things about reparations also, and this is maybe a good point to assert this, is that, you know, reparations is about self-determination. And so if a government says, okay, well, we acknowledge that we were wrong, that we've hurt these people and we want to make amends, it's not for them to dictate the terms. Like I said, some colleges, for example, have been, addressing this issue, but they're saying, well, we'll put together a fund for $10 million and, which they'll make money off of because of the interest or whatever. And they'll we'll change the name of this building, take this white person's name and put up a black person's name on the building. But, those aren't necessarily things that the students of African descent or the wider Black communities ask for from that institution. So, so reparations also has an element of self-determination. It's not just, Europeans saying, okay, we're wrong and this is what we will do. It's no, we're wrong and tell us what we need to do to make amends for the harms that we have created.
Yes, and I think she captured some of what you shared today when she said that it is not about. You're not the problem.
Right.
You are not the problem. What your ancestors did, that's the problem that needs to be solved, and you're copying it. For the most part, you're continuing it. That's why she said it's still happening. Those who started it, you're just carrying it forward. You just continue. When you don't acknowledge it, you just continue to do it. And so one of the things that I'm picking up on what you're saying, we can't talk about what people are doing to us if we allow it. We have to take care of our own. But this is what it's going to take. And you need to compensate us with what you owe so that we can help our people. I think it's sad when people think, oh, Black people want handouts. No, we don't. Go back to our history. We were quite sufficient, self-sufficient.
That's right.
You see, but now, unfortunately, I have no problems with the world being, an open field right now. The world is a big Serengeti. But we, as a people, need to, when you look in that mirror, you ask yourself, what can I do? What should we be doing? Acknowledge that there's something wrong and be proud. And, there are some people who are mealy-mouthed, even talking about reparations because they're embarrassed. Mm-hmm. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, well, I some of my background is I was really influenced by both my parents. My dad is an activist, did a lot of work in the movement from his early college days all the way through and working with Martin Luther King and Jesse Jackson and many elected officials over the years. My mom is what I called her a culture nationalist. So she was one that introduced me to African culture and into Kwanzaa and to vegetarianism and things like that. And so I like to combine those two in my life. And when I think about each generation, or really each individual, really has to ask themselves, like, once I know certain things, or once I know about the history of Black people, or history of what's happened to people in the world, what am I doing to make a difference? What am I individually doing? Many people feel, and what am I doing? And let me be clear too. What am I doing to help Black people collectively, or and because a lot of times, sometimes we've gotten socialized in Western culture to think individual. So people will say, well, if I'm financially successful and I can make sure that my children are okay, then I'm making a difference for people. And I mean, it's everybody wants to be a certain level of comfort, and everybody wants a certain level of being able to see their children do better than them. But we also have to, I think more collectively as what are the conditions that create the situation that we find ourselves in, Black people, and how do we change those conditions? And that's why, when I found out about reparations, I was like all in, because to me, it was the one thing that could really address systematically and holistically all the different issues facing Black people, from diabetes to, like I said, if you want to repatriate, if you feel like we should have our own nation, if you want to be more, if you just want to fit in with America, if you want to have our own African nation, whatever road that you want to go down for what some people call freedom and liberation, reparations can be that vehicle to take us there.
Yes. I want to just share this thought, and we'll continue. Akachi Azubike says that may she rest in peace. I appreciate her sentiments. However, she was too kind. We can't make a claim for reparations and state we state what was done to us in a sanitized manner. We gave them nothing. They took it. They took not out of survival because of a lack of humanity, to survive in harmony, other humans on the planet. The reason why, and Akachi is right, that's the part of her speech that I kind of like, okay, it is indeed sanitized to some, it's not their fault. But I say it's not their fault if we continue to allow it. That's where my point comes in. Mm-hmm. If you're going to say it's not their point, it's not their fault, then you have to include there somewhere to tell our people it's our fault if we continue to allow it. If we don't bring it to light, if we don't say what's happening, we have to say it. Now, you have to remember, one of the things that when you live in Africa and you want to tell the truth, sometimes your life is in jeopardy.
Yes.
Because they don't want you to say these things. So maybe she's trying to, still stay safe, but squeeze in somewhere. Now, I'm not so mad at you, but, this is what you guys are doing. Just like Akachi said, a little bit sanitized to keep certain people happy. But the truth of the matter is, yes, we didn't come right out and say, hey, take all of this stuff. You came in and you took it. You see what I'm saying? And you deprived us of who we are. Mentally, you took spiritually, you took resources. I mean, these things were taken by force. All right. But anyway, to come back to reparation, I have one question I need to ask you. I'm aware that it reverberates globally, in Africa, also in African enclaves. My question is, how have you guys approached the Africans on the continent to ask for reparations? Now, recently, France wasn't necessarily, they didn't offer any reparations, but France did admit, that so much was done to the Black world. All right. And they apologized to it. Now we're waiting to see. Now, so what? Now what? Right. What are you planning to do? Now, so as far as you know, what is the position of most of the African nations about reparations? Are you in contact with the leaders of Africa, and how is that working?
Yeah, so let me give a little background on that. So in 2001, there was a convening a conference on racism that was held in Durban, South Africa. And some of the activists in the reparations movement, particularly December 12th movement and some other organizations, knowing about how international law and United Nations work, they knew that when they have these big convenings, that there's always some type of report or document that comes out. And what they also knew was that if something is declared a crime against humanity, then whatever that is declared, there's no statute of limitations. So, for example, a lot of people say that, we're talking about slavery, which happened, hundreds, a little over 150 years ago, ended. And so that people are saying that happened so long ago, whatever. So they began to organize with African nations, with the Caribbean, Central South America. They had pre-meetings, and they had meetings in Asia and different places. And they began organizing people around the fact that we wanted that final document to declare that slavery and colonialism was a crime against humanity. And so they were successful in doing that at that conference in Durban. And so in that final document, that wording was put into that document. So that allows people of African descent, wherever they are in the Caribbean and Europe, in Central and South America, to fight even harder for reparations, and the colonial powers cannot say it was a long time ago. There's statute of limitations based on it being declared a crime against humanity. But coming out of that conference, there was something that was created called the Global African Congress. And the Global African Congress was activists from Africa and the Caribbean, again, Central South America and Europe, coming together to begin to strategize more on how to support each other in their reparations in their reparations efforts. And then coming out of that, in 2011, the United Nations declared something called the International Year of People of African Descent.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, again, countries and stuff are still talking and working with each other. In 2013, you have one of the leaders of the Caribbean saying, look, we need to centralize this conversation of reparations. And so when CARICOM comes together, it's like 14 nations, leaders from 14 Caribbean nations come together, and they decided that they were going to make reparations a central issue. And so each government in the Caribbean had to create a reparations commission and then send a representative from that commission to the Caribbean-wide reparations commission. And again, in Cobra and other activists in the reparations movement, we were in touch with them through their process and continue to stay in touch with them in that process. And then in 2015, the United Nations issued something called the Decade for People of African Descent. And in that Decade for People of African Descent, reparations is one of the things there's something called the Durban Program of Action that came out of that international. So the International Decade for People of African Descent, and so reparations is one of the things that's included in that document. And so again, we like I said, I think we should do a much better job. But we have in Cobra some specific links with some certain African nations. But in general, we've been having these convenings. And so what then happened after that was this just happened in 2020, in December of 2022, and they just had a follow-up meeting just this week. Was the United Nations created something called the UN Permanent Forum of People of African Descent. So again, this is an evolution coming out of these previous convenings to again, and the main conversation with the United Nations Permanent Forum of People of African Descent is around reparations. And I'm really, and they just, like I said, they just literally met May 31st through, I guess, yesterday in the UN in New York. The first one was held at the UN in Geneva in December. And so there's a building momentum of activists working through these UN convenings from Africa, from the Caribbean, from Europe, Central and South America, to continue to strategize with each other and support each other's work, and to continue to elevate it through the platform of the UN.
Okay, well, it's very, very good to hear all of this. Like, I'm going to take one quick minute to recognize the sponsor of Ntomodu Show, GLAM. One moment, please. I'll be right back. The president and founder of Glam Body Scrubs is a Black woman. She's a Black judge, and she's just doing tremendous work in the community, helping women who are coming out of these prison systems. And now we're going into Africa, and she's into philanthropy. We're so proud of her. So she's our sponsor. Well, here's the question that I have now as we continue.
I would like to maybe put her in touch with a sister comrade of mine. I know her name is called Nana, and she has an organization called Sister Care Alliance. So she does a lot of work with women coming out of prison, as well as other ways that she helps women in distress situations. And excellent. So maybe they might be able to do some partnering. In fact, she just opened her office. She's been doing work for several years, but she actually just opened the office this week.
Oh, that's wonderful. I certainly would. If I can give you, I'll call her.
Yeah, and then you might want to interview her on your show as well, because she's doing some really dynamic work around women. She also wrote a book around self-care. Around self-care and what we have to do to heal ourselves and maintain a balance in the world. while we're trying to say, heal the world, we also got to heal ourselves simultaneously. So
Yes,
she's
we
written a
have
very
to.
good book on that, on self-care. And matter of fact, she was invited to South Africa to speak about to a group of women about her book.
Yes, yes, yes. We my organization, the African Women Mobilization Commission, we're doing a lot of work helping women and children and educating our youth, male and female and all of that. And so I would certainly like to speak with her, interview her. And, cause that's one of the things that we have to do is do a lot of collaboration as a people,
Sure.
And I just want to say this, it's so important that people understand that we as African people, we love each other enough to do for each other. Because sometimes when you come from the motherland and you say, hey, I want to help, I want to raise funds, I want to help our people get suspicious. It's almost, it's ingrained in us to think that, oh, you can't trust your own people. You can't trust it. Not everybody is interested in anything other than doing the right thing to help our people move along. So I just wanted to put that out there. Okay, so here's the question. This is my final question to you, and you can take as much time as you need to respond to it. Some people, when they talk about Black Lives Matter, okay, they think of reparations. And for those who are anti-reparations, they become anti-Black Lives Matter. They don't quite understand what the particular, what Black Lives Matter is trying to achieve, as well as what reparations is trying to achieve. Now, my question is, can you shed some light on how reparation is different from other movements like Black Lives Matter, or are they together, or are they working together? When I did my impromptu interviews of people, that was one of the things that they were talking about. Oh, Black Lives Matter is just a reparation, asking for money, all that. The confusion is real. So you've got the floor.
Okay, let me see. All right. So, as I said before, I think that, well, first of all, let me say, reparations movement really began even before slavery ended. And it's been a continuous movement all the way up to now. One of the things that I often do is that I often sometimes, I tell people, give me any date between, say, slavery ended 1865 up to now, and I could tell you what organizations or individuals were working on this conversation called reparations, or working on trying to deal with that. So I think that reparations, is really grounded in our story, or some people say history, is really grounded in not, we start with the enslavement period, but it comes all the way up to the present. Black Lives Matter, and there's even within Black Lives Matter, there's different groups. So there's Black Lives Matter, the organization. There's also, as you read in my intro, there's something called the Movement for Black Lives, which like I said, myself and other people, we've supported some of their efforts. The Movement for Black Lives, as well as Black Lives Matter, to me, more comes out of a reactionary space, reacting to the, at that time, when Black Lives Matter was coming out, it was coming out as reacting to the police murders and the police violence against Black people. And that needs to be addressed. However, I think but within the reparations conversation, that's just one piece of all that needs to be addressed for people of African descent in terms of reparations. And then the Movement for Black Lives did go a step further and decided to look at some other areas that they felt like they wanted to address beyond just police brutality and police murder of our people. And so they came up with a platform of 6 things, and I can't remember all 6 right now, but I know that reparations was one of the 6. So they've embraced reparations as one of the issues that they support. But I more like to look at reparations as the total package. And then within reparations, you can address all the other different issues that concern, that you may feel of concern to Black people. I did want to go back though. I hope I answered the question. I did want to go back a little bit, though. I know we've been jumping around a little bit, but to pick up a little bit on some of the successes on reparation movement, because we really have had, as I had mentioned, some successes at the national level. So after we reintroduced that bill, the updated bill, Conyers left out of office and passed the baton on to Sheila Jackson Lee. And Sheila Jackson Lee has been a powerhouse and super dynamic and and on fire and pushing HR 40. And so every year we would get maybe 30 to 40 co-sponsors. Well, we started working with her, and other organizations started working with her, and we were able to get up to 200 and between 216 218 co-sponsors of the bill and yes votes. In order to pass a bill in the Congress, you have to have 218. So for us to get 50, 60, 80, 100, 216, 218 was just a phenomenal accomplishment in 2022. And really with that many votes, the leadership of the Democratic Party should have taken HR 40 to the floor. Okay, let me back up. Simultaneously, while we were getting all of these co-sponsors, I mentioned before, when Conyers would introduce the bill every year, it would die in committee. Well, on April the 14th, 2021, HR 40 was for the first time passed out of committee. That was a historical movement of success and accomplishment for the reparations movement, to actually move HR 40 from just being in committee to coming out of committee, which now means, like I said, it can go to the floor of Congress and be voted on. And I also need to back up a little bit more also, which is in April 9th, 2019, Senator Cory Booker introduced a Senate version to HR 40. Again, this is very, very important. Again, these are landmarks that I'm mentioning, because to have a bill in the House, we've had it in the House since 1989, as I mentioned, when Conyers first introduced it. But now to have a companion bill in the Senate helps to move a bill. This is the first time in history that we've had a bill other than during Reconstruction in Congress, in the House and in the Senate, for reparations. And so Cory Booker also in the Senate, I think maybe like 25 senators have signed on out of 100, which is also a significant accomplishment. And then we also had some hearings on HR 40. June 19, 2019, there was a major hearing. And what hearings do is they lay the foundation for the validity of a bill. So you have hearings on the bill, any bill in Congress, and what you do is you bring experts to the room to say, this is how this bill is significant. This is how this bill is important to, in this case, Black people, but really to people in the United States, period, and why this bill is a worthy bill to be passed by Congress. And so we had Danny Glover and Ta-Nehisi Coates and other people who were on that, and they did not have any clue. I mean, I was even surprised at the number of people that showed up for that hearing. Some people say as high as 800 people came to that hearing.
Wow.
I was there myself, and I remember they had like 4 overflow rooms. So there was a room that the hearing was in, then had another room with a television screen, and another room and another room. It was like 3 or 4 overflow rooms. That's how many people were there that they were not prepared for, that came for that the hearing of HR. And I remember talking to a young lady in the hallway, and she said, what, they think after 400 years we was not going to show up for our reparations? For the hearing for our reparations? So I'm paraphrasing, but she said something to that effect. I said, that's not, I like that. But so we've had some of these congressional accomplishments along the way. Unfortunately, we know in the 2022 elections that the House flipped Republican.
Yeah. So
the strategy for now moving HR 40, even though the Senate is still controlled by the Democrats by a few votes, but that the strategy has been focused on getting Biden to issue a reparations commission by executive order, which he could very easily do. So we're really putting pressure on him and redirecting the focus from Congress now to Biden to moving, creating a reparations commission. I had to get some of those milestones and updates in there.
That is fantastic. I'm going to take another quick break, and then my final question to you, and we'll wrap up. I want to, encourage people to join an organization that I'm the president of, the African Women Mobilization Commission. We'll be right back.
Greetings. Are you passionate about the elevation and empowerment of women in society? Are you eager to help the way women are treated in different parts of the world? Do you want to help provide underprivileged women the tools they need to thrive and ensure their financial independence and safety? Do you envision a world with more female leaders? Then sign up to be a member of the African Women Mobilization Commission.
Always mess up when you don't need it to. So now the final question that I have for you today, you have at least 3 minutes to discuss that, because I think it's important. And that is, what can people do? Because I tell you, I'm sure a lot of individuals have gotten quite a bit from this discussion today, and I know personally I've gotten a little bit more enlightened, and hopefully many others. But some of us are not quite sure, how to add their voices and increase in the movement, the engagement to the movement. So tell me, what can people do to get more involved and engaged in the reparations movement? Where do we go? What do we do?
Certainly. Thank you. So again, people can join in Cobra. In Cobra, our website is officialincobraonline.org, officialincobraonline.org, and you could join anywhere in the United States, but we also have chapters in certain cities. So depending on where you are, there may be a chapter in your city that you can get in, a local chapter that you can get involved with. Like I said, we're broadcasting here in Atlanta. There is an Atlanta chapter of Incobra. And so that would be Incobra Atlanta at gmail.com. I hope I got that right. Incobra Atlanta at gmail.com. Also, I'll give out my direct information if people would like to connect with me directly. Reparations, that's reparations, the letter J at gmail.com, reparations J at gmail.com. I'll give out my phone number as well, 678-437-7882. And really, I was thinking about how over the years, oftentimes I would speak at the Malcolm X Festival. And one of the things I started saying some years ago was that, we're doing this work behind the scenes. So we're doing this work, organizing work to move reparations forward. But there's going to come a time where we're going to really need the community to get involved. And that's the time that we're in right now. Like I said, there's the Fulton County Reparations Task Force. If you're here in Fulton County, right now they don't even have all of their commissioners. They have the ability to have 14 commissioners on that reparations task force. And I think they only have about between 6 and 8. So they still have room for people to get involved. There's still going to be time when they're going to be looking for the community to make recommendations, specific recommendations of what could happen. I was speaking to a friend, a close friend of mine, and the Malcolm X Festival, and I was telling her about all of the reparations updates and stuff. She said, and kind of asked me what you just said. Well, what can I do? What can I do? How does that make a difference for me? And she's a midwife. And so I said to her, I know that there's a lot of, challenges with recognizing, midwifery and being a doula and all of that. And so I know there's a lot of statistics that there's not statistics. I don't want to reduce it to statistics. We know that Black women in this country die at a much higher rate than white women in childbirth. And we know that there's certain, and so perhaps the part of our reparations, recommendation could be putting some more funding and education around creating more midwives and doulas, and setting up centers where women can have more access to midwives and doulas, as opposed to necessarily going to a hospital to deliver their child. And again, I don't know enough about that to go in detail, but what I do know is that I'm using it as an example of something that if you have an idea or think something that you're working on that you think could help to advance people of African descent, based on something that is a harm that we've experienced as Black people, this is the time now to start bringing ideas and proposals forward to these different reparations task force. And again, I would encourage people to look at the California Reparations Task Force. They had many hearings. You could go back and look at those and see how they kind of went through their own process of determining who would be eligible, what types of reparations. They've issued 2 reports now on what forms reparations would take very specifically. They looked at different things from health to mass incarceration to different things to try to come up with different proposals to address the concerns of Black people. So that's what really I would encourage people to do now, is to find out if there's a reparations task, reparations meetings, groups going on in your city or in your state, and get involved in the process. Find out, in addition to NCOBRA, but find out how, what are some ideas that you can contribute to, because that's what we really needed now, is we need to hear from the community. What are some solutions?
Please give me your phone number again. Let me share it on the screen.
It's 678-437-7882. 678-437-7882.
So that everybody who is interested in learning a little bit more about this organization, this is about us. It's not something that any one person can handle. It's not something that we say, that sounds interesting, and we walk away. When you do that, then you allow what had happened and what continues to happen to continue to fester. So, history repeats itself. When you play ignorant, when you act like you're not a part of it, when you act like you don't know what's going on and you don't want to be a part of it, we, all of us, have to play a role. Call Brother Jumoke. Find out. Ask questions. No more. I can't give you all the information about all the contacts you can make, but just this one number. Use it and find out how you can be a part of change, how you can be a part of reparations, because it's all about us. You've heard him, and let's give him a call and make sure that he understands that there are more people out here who are interested in helping to make a difference. Thank you, my brother Jumoke, for that very informative session. Everyone wants to feel safe and bring into view the past wounds still festering and seeking healing. We are witness to what our people have gone through, seeking the necessary compensation and redress to cleanse our wounds. Reparations will go a long way to further the vacuous utterances of people saying, we apologize. We want a little bit more than that. That is why we advocate reparations. Thank you, viewers, for tuning in. Remember to keep your ears and your heart open to pick up new information and add to your repertoire. You can never learn too much. So until you join us again.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Uwa, for giving us this opportunity to talk about reparations.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. On that note, I say good day to all of you. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday. Have a good one. Bye-bye.